What does it mean to trust someone, and can we just decide to do it? In his paper, Deciding to Trust, Coming to Believe, philosopher Richard Holton sets out to answer exactly these questions. And if these kinds of questions are ones that interest you, then give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more trust-based musings. Holton starts us off with a classic example. If you've ever taken a drama class, you might remember this kind of an exercise. So you're blindfolded, standing in the middle of a circle. The group spins you around until you lose all sense of direction. And then with your arms at your sides and your legs straight out, you let yourself fall backwards. Hopefully into the arms of someone, but ultimately into the unknown. Now they've told you that they'll catch you, but you don't know that they will. You can't see them. You fall because in that moment you decide to trust. And if you're anything like me, there is a split second in there where you hesitate, your body tenses, your mind asks, do I really believe that they'll catch me? And that moment matters because it doesn't just feel like you're relying on someone. It feels like you're really choosing to trust them. Sometimes this goes well, sometimes... Anyway, that case is where Holton's argument begins. And he begins, as everyone should, with Annette Beyer. Specifically, he starts off by endorsing her view that there's a really important difference between trust on the one hand and reliance on the other. Now, I have a whole other video on the difference between trust and reliance, and I'll link to this down below. But just quickly, we can illustrate a bit of the distinction. So, to quote from Beyer, we may rely on our fellows' fear of the newly appointed security guards in shops to deter them from injecting poison into the food on the shelves once we have ceased to trust them. Now, this is reliance for sure, but it doesn't seem to be much like trust. This case really seems to be grounded in fear, in this case the fear of the security guards, rather than anything more positively motivated like trust. And trust can seem on first inspection to be motivated by goodwill. If you think about the case of the trust fall, really what you're doing there is you're dependent on the goodwill of the people around you to not let you fall. And this is where Holton's view diverges from Beyer's. He rightly notes that her account, and again I have a video on her account, closely connects trust and goodwill. But Holton thinks that actually this can't be quite right, and he gives us two cases to help us see why, and why we need to tease them apart a bit. To begin with, relying on someone's goodwill towards you actually isn't enough to constitute trust. For instance, a confidence trickster, a con man, might count on your goodwill to manipulate you into doing something, but that doesn't mean that they trust you. And conversely, trust doesn't always require goodwill either. I can trust someone to care for a third party, or even act responsibly in relation to themselves, without needing them to have any goodwill towards me personally at all. We can unpack this. So take the idea of an estranged couple. They can be deep into interpersonal conflict with one another, but one partner may still trust the other to care for the children, even if there is no goodwill left. There is no warmth or affection between them at all. Okay, so for sure, Holton thinks that there is this difference between trust and reliance, but for him then, what does this kind of come down to? Well, let's start off by just reflecting on reliance and then seeing what else we need to say about it in order to get us to trust. What truly seems to matter is the kind of emotional response that trust enables, what Strawson called the reactive attitudes. And these are emotions like resentment, hurt or gratitude that we typically direct only towards people. So when someone fails us, we may feel resentment. When they go out of their way to help, we feel gratitude. Perhaps we're even moved by it. But when a machine breaks, we might feel frustration or anger, but we don't feel betrayed or morally wronged. So, thinks Strawson, we take a particular stance towards people that we don't take towards machines. Now, of course, this does raise the question of exactly what a stance is. Is it something like this? Maybe not. Or like this? Again, perhaps not. And so very roughly, we engage with people as participants in the moral world, and we don't do the same in the cases of machines. We don't treat them as participants in the moral world in the same kind of way. And this, Holton thinks, is how we should think about trust as well. As he puts it, I think that the difference between trust and reliance is that trust involves something like a participant stance towards the person you're trusting. When you trust someone to do something, you rely on them to do it, and you regard that reliance in a certain way. You have a readiness to feel betrayal should it be disappointed, and gratitude should it be upheld. In short, you take a stance of trust towards the person on whom you rely. And it's that stance that marks the difference between reliance and trust. When the car breaks down, we might be angry, but when a friend lets us down, we feel betrayed. So trust for Holton is taking a stance towards people. Now, notably though, this treating trust as a stance means that trust isn't a belief. To return to the quote just given, when you trust, you have a readiness to feel betrayal, should it be disappointed, gratitude should it be upheld. But a readiness to feel betrayal isn't a belief, it's a readiness. I can be ready to go without believing it's time to go, for instance. So readinesses aren't beliefs. Now, Holton thinks that this view of trust is in fact supported by the example that we gave at the start of the trust fall. If trust were simply a belief, then it wouldn't make sense to talk about deciding to trust in the way that we did in the case involving those trust falls, because beliefs aren't directly under our voluntary control in the same kind of way. You can't decide to believe something just because it's useful or socially helpful, but you can decide to trust someone for those sorts of reasons, as in the trust fall. So for that reason, among others, Holton thinks that trust really can essentially involve not a belief, but a stance. So to trust someone is to adopt what Strawson called the participant stance. Holton uses this, it's treating them as a moral, responsible agent whose actions matter in a personal and normative way. And when we take this stance, we're not just predicting behaviour or relying on outcomes, we're opening ourselves up to reactive attitudes like gratitude, resentment or betrayal. And so trust isn't just about what someone will do, it's about what they ought to do and our readiness to respond if they let us down. Trust in this view is less about belief, as we've seen, and far more about relational commitment and moral expectation. And there we have it. There is a quick peek at Holton's view of trust. The participant stance is a core component of that, and I know that I can take that stance towards all of you when it comes to liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Until next time, stay suitably trusting.